Hello everyone. In today's video I wanted to show you something new that I got. It's a nice new plastic palette I found in an art store here in Chiang Mai. I don't need a new palette of course, but well, I already have far too many, but this one has something that my others don't. So if I open these clips and then flip over the lid, you'll see it has this blue airtight rubber seal. Yeah, it'll be great to be able to keep my paints nice and moist all the time. It also comes with this tray inside, which is, I guess, just extra mixing space. You can probably mix on the inside of the lid too. The palette itself, it has 20 wells and mixing space in the center. The wells are nice and deep and big enough for larger brushes. The palette seems well made overall, no sharp edges. I'm not sure if it's actually meant for watercolors or if it's meant for acrylics, but hopefully it will work out fine. The reason I'm going to use to justify buying this palette is my collection of Rembrandt watercolors. After swatching them out a few days ago, I realized that I just have way too many colors. Most of them I'll never use, especially if I stick with my favorite 9-well palette. I love my 9-well palette, of course, and I do plan going back to it as my main palette again in the future. But I started thinking the only way I'm going to use up all these Rembrandt paints is if they're available to me in my palette at all times. So I thought I'd use this palette as my main Rembrandt palette for a while and include many of the extra paints I have so I can actually experiment with them a bit until they're all used up, and then I can go back to my limited palette. Yeah, that's the plan anyway. So then, what am I going to put in the palette? First, we've got Cadmium Yellow Lemon, which is PY35. This is the only non-earth Rembrandt yellow that I have. I don't really feel the need for another yellow, but many people have recommended PY150 to me. Maybe once I've used this one up, I'll get that as a replacement. We'll see. Then we have Cadmium Red Medium, which is PR108. I've also got a 20ml tube of Cadmium Red Light that I want to use up, but I'm going to use up this small tube of Cad Red Medium first. It's probably going to take a while to use it up as it doesn't get used very often, even when it is in my palette. Next is Permanent Madder Lake, PR264 and PV19. It was a choice between this and the Carmine. I want to finish both tubes as they're from the old range and have been replaced by single pigment versions. I'll use this 5ml Madder Lake tube up first, and then I'll start on the Carmine. Quinacridone Rose Magenta, PR122. As I've said in previous videos, this is a new colour to me. Seems like it could be very useful, but I'm a little concerned about the light fastness. I'll have to do my own tests with that. I guess time will tell if I buy it again once it's used up. Ultramarine Violet, PV15. This is a colour I've never really used before, but I liked it when I swatched it out a few videos ago. I'm not exactly sure where I'll use it, but it'll be fun experimenting with it till it runs out. Ultramarine Deep, PB29. Everyone uses or has used Ultramarine. It's not my favourite, but I've got a 5ml tube I want to use up, so it's going in the palette. Who knows, maybe I'll learn to love it again. Okay, so the next two wells are going to be filled with paint from my herring palette. Cobalt Blue will go in the large well, and then Phthalo Blue Red shade will go in the well next to it. Right, Turquoise Blue, PB15 and PG7. Definitely not the kind of colour I would normally use. But I hear turquoise is good for mixing greens. If I like it, I'll probably replace it with a cobalt turquoise in the future. Though I'm totally sure that's completely different to this. The last one on this side of the palette is going to be Payne's Grey. But again, I'll have to scoop that out of my herring palette. Now I'm going to move to the large well in the top left. I'm going to be putting my earths down this left-hand side of the palette, I think. So starting with raw sienna, which is PY43. I've not used Rembrandt's raw sienna all that much, so I'm looking forward to seeing how it compares to the yellow ochre and raw umber that I have. In the next well, I'm going to be putting burnt sienna, but again, I've got to scoop that out from the herring palette. So next is raw umber, which is PBR7. This is discontinued by Rembrandt, so I'm just going to use it all up and say goodbye. I might get the greenish umber that's replaced it in the range, but probably not. In the bottom big well will be burnt umber, which is PBR7. I don't always have burnt umber in my palette, but I often wish I did. Usually if I want a darker brown, I'd mix my burnt sienna with ultramarine or Payne's Grey. We'll see how often I use it. Okay, in the next two wells, I'll put my earth reds, so it'll be Indian Red and light Oxide Red. I'll get both of them out of the herring palette. So that will leave me with 4 empty wells. I think I'm just going to use these for odd colours and half-empty tubes that I want to finish. Okay, so now I'm going to transfer the paints from my herring palette and I'll be right back. Okay, so I've transferred all the paints from the herring palette and added a couple of extras. Going round clockwise, we've got 1 Cadmium Yellow Lemon, 2 Cadmium Red Light, 3 Permanent Madder Lake, 4 is Quinacridone Rose Magenta, 5 is Ultramarine Violet, 6 is Ultramarine Deep, 7 is Cobalt Blue, 8 is Phthalo Blue Red Shade, 9 is Turquoise Blue, 10 is Payne's Grey, 11 is Indanthrene Blue, 12 is Cobalt Violet, 13 is Yellow Ochre, 14 is Light Oxide Red, 15 is Indian Red, 16 is Burnt Umber, 17 is Raw Umber, 18 is Burnt Sienna, and 19 is Raw Sienna. Wow, that's more than double the amount of colours I usually have available to me in a palette. I'd say it does hurt my head a bit, but I'm determined to use them all up. So now I'm going to paint out a quick swatch card so that I can identify each of the paints and where they are. This is not something I'd usually do, but I'm going to do it for the purposes of this video. I usually think that, you know, if it's your daily palette, you kind of know what all the colours are and what they look like anyway. I understand doing this if you have a really large 48 colour palette or something, then yeah, it would make sense. Or if you're putting pans in storage and want to know which each one is and what they look like. But yeah, for my daily palette, I don't think I'd usually bother. Okay, great. So that's all of them painted out now. I've just got one well left empty. I'm not totally sure what's going to go in that. I might put cobalt green or chromium oxide green. Not sure yet. One more thing I wanted to show with this palette was how much it beads up. I mean, this is a common thing with most plastic palettes, but yeah, this one feels pretty crazy. I'm hoping that it will be okay after some use, but yeah, that remains to be seen. One good thing I've noticed though is I tried some phthalo colours on here and there doesn't seem to be any staining at all. I can kind of just... So that's pretty good for keeping it clean. I'm not exactly sure why it doesn't stain. I don't know, maybe the plastic's different. Maybe the palette's meant for acrylics rather than watercolours. I really don't know. But yeah, I think I'm quite happy with it. Will be fun to use. We'll see how it goes. Sorry I didn't mention anything about the make or model of the palette. That's just because I have no clue. It's one of those things that's just unbranded, I guess made in China, and just in a clear plastic bag at the art store. I will do some research though, and if I do find any links or anything, or any model numbers, then I'll add them to the comments. If you have any questions, then don't hesitate to ask. And thank you for watching. I'll catch you in the next video. Bye bye.